I tested my boyfriend's deadly allergy to see if he'd choose me over the hospital. Now he's gone. I need some brutal honesty here, Reddit. I need you to tell me if I'm a monster or just the stupidest woman alive, because right now I can't tell the difference. I think I just permanently destroyed my relationship with my boyfriend, Casper, over what I told myself was a test. And the worst part is, he was perfect. Genuinely, sickeningly perfect. He wasn't just a good boyfriend, he was the blueprint. The kind of man who remembers your dad's birthday, learns the names of all your coworkers, and keeps your favorite snacks stocked in his pantry without ever being asked. He was patient when I was chaotic, calm when I was spiraling, and his friends' girlfriends openly admitted they were jealous of me. For 3 years, he was my rock. There was only one single, non-negotiable rule in our lives. A giant, flashing neon sign at the very entrance of our relationship. Casper has a severe, life-threatening nut allergy. This wasn't a mild intolerance, not a gets a few hives situation. We're talking full-blown anaphylactic shock. His throat closes up, he can't breathe, and it's an immediate trip to the ER or worse. It was the first serious thing he ever told me about himself. We've read food labels together more times than I can count. I've watched him politely interrogate waiters and send food back if he wasn't 100 sure. His life literally depends on it. And I knew this. I swear, I knew every single detail of it. Which is why what I did makes no sense, not even to me. I'm sitting here in the wreckage of my life, my apartment deafeningly silent, and I just don't understand how I let this happen. How I became this person. To understand the sheer insanity of what I did, you need to understand the ghost that lives in my head. Before Casper, there was a guy named Ryan. Our ending wasn't a breakup. It was a vanishing act. One Tuesday he told me he loved me, and on Wednesday his number was disconnected, his social media was gone, and I was blocked everywhere. The silence was the worst part. The dawning, sickening realization that I hadn't just been dumped, I had been erased. I called his mother, who stammered something about him needing space. I messaged his friends, who left me on read. It was a social execution, and the emotional whiplash left me with a deep, ugly scar, a pathological fear of abandonment. I spent 2 years in therapy just to feel normal enough to date again. Then I met Casper. He was the antidote to Ryan. Steady, reliable, and transparent. But my trauma had rewired my brain. Casper is a classic introvert, a processor. When we had disagreements, which were rare and always minor, he didn't yell or argue. He'd get quiet. He would say, "I need some space to think about this," and retreat into himself for a few hours, sometimes even a day. For a normal person, this is a healthy coping mechanism. For me, every moment of his silence was a silent, screaming siren. The ghost of Ryan would start whispering in my ear, "He's leaving. He's figured you out. This is how it starts. He's packing a bag in his mind right now." I knew, logically, that this was my own baggage. Casper always came back, usually with a cup of tea for me and a calm, thought-out way to resolve our issue. He'd hold me and say, "See, we're okay, I'm not going anywhere." But the fear was a physical thing, a cold knot in my stomach that never fully untied. It felt like an addiction. The panic was the withdrawal, and his reassurance was the fix. And with every fix, the craving for a bigger, more permanent one grew. Last month, the pressure at my job became unbearable. I was stressed, irritable, and picking fights over nothing. Casper, true to form, was a saint. He cooked for me, listened to me vent, and tried to help me unwind. But one evening, after I snapped at him for something utterly ridiculous, I think it was about how he loaded the dishwasher, he got that look on his face. The quiet one. "I think I'm going to go for a long walk," he said softly. "We can talk when I get back." The panic that seized me was instant and overwhelming. He was gone for 3 hours. For 180 minutes, I was a prisoner in my own apartment. I checked his location on my phone obsessively. I reread our last texts, searching for hidden meanings. I almost called his sister to ask if he was with her. I was in a full-blown spiral, convinced he was walking away for good. When he finally returned, he was his usual calm self, ready to talk. But I was exhausted, hollowed out by the adrenaline. And in that hollowed-out space, the seed was planted. A toxic, twisted little thought started to grow. I can't live like this anymore. I need definitive proof. I need a test so absolute that it will silence the ghost forever. And what could be more absolute than a choice between his own life and me? In my warped, terrified mind, his allergy wasn't just a medical condition. It was the ultimate boundary. If I could make him choose me over his own survival, he would never, ever leave. It was my birthday last week. The day started beautifully. I woke up to Casper whispering, "Happy birthday," and the smell of coffee. He'd made me breakfast in bed. He told me to relax all day and that he would handle everything for dinner. He was going to make my absolute favorite dish, a rich, creamy Thai green curry with chicken. It's a complex recipe, one he'd spent weeks perfecting just for me. All afternoon, I watched him in the kitchen. He was so meticulous, so full of love. He laid out every ingredient, double-checking the labels on the coconut milk and the fish sauce, making sure there was no cross-contamination warning. He washed his hands a dozen times. He was creating a perfectly safe, beautiful meal for me, and as I watched him, a part of my brain, the sane part, was screaming. It was a tiny voice, but it was there, begging me to stop, to just enjoy this perfect moment with this perfect man. But the obsession, the need for that final, insane proof, was louder. It was like a fever. Earlier in the week, I had gone to a specialty food store and bought a small, discreet packet of finely ground peanut powder. I'd hidden it at the back of the pantry, behind the old cans of beans. It felt like a prop from a horror movie, a vial of poison. Even as I bought it, I told myself I'd never use it. It was just a safety blanket, a crazy thought I needed to hold in my hand to feel in control. While Casper was on the balcony taking a call from his mom, who was wishing me a happy birthday, the fever broke. The quiet kitchen, the simmering pot of curry on the stove. It was my chance. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the packet. I kept telling myself it was a tiny amount, a minuscule dose. Just enough to trigger a reaction, not enough to be truly dangerous. Just enough for him to get a rash, maybe feel his throat get a little tight. He would panic, he would need me, and I would be there to comfort him, to hold him, to be his savior. He would see that my presence was more important than a hospital, and in that moment of shared crisis, my fear would finally be cured. With my heart pounding in my ears, I took a small pinch of the powder and stirred it into the portion of curry in his bowl. It dissolved instantly, leaving no trace. When he came back inside, smiling, I felt a wave of nausea, a mixture of guilt and terrifying anticipation. He dished up the rice, poured us both a glass of wine, and sat down opposite me. "To the birthday girl," he said, raising his glass. "I love you more than anything." I smiled back, a brittle, fake smile, and watched him pick up his spoon. He took the first bite, and his face lit up with pleasure. "It's good, right?" he asked, proud of his creation. For a split second, a wave of relief washed over me. Maybe I hadn't used enough. Maybe nothing would happen, and this horrible secret would just be mine to carry forever. Then he took a second spoonful. The change was instantaneous and terrifying. It wasn't slow. It was like a switch being flipped. The smile vanished from his face, replaced by a look of utter confusion. He swallowed hard, his brow furrowed. "That's weird," he mumbled, putting his spoon down. He coughed, a small, dry sound. Then another, harsher one. His hand went to his throat. "Syrah," he rasped, and his voice was already changing, becoming tight and hoarse. Something's wrong. I just sat there, frozen, the script I'd written in my head dissolving into static. This wasn't the romantic, dramatic scene I had envisioned. This was violent, ugly. Red blotches were blooming across his neck and cheeks, spreading like fire. His breathing became a ragged, desperate wheeze. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a dawning horror and a question I couldn't bear to answer. My fantasy was that he would turn to me, that he would cling to me and say my name. But he didn't. His training, his years of living with this, kicked in. His movements were clumsy, panicked, but full of purpose. He stumbled from his chair, knocking it over with a loud crash, and fumbled for his pocket. He wasn't looking at me for comfort. He was looking past me, towards the door, towards survival. He managed to pull out his EpiPen. With a shaking hand, he jammed the needle into his own thigh, right through his jeans. He let out a choked gasp of pain. The image of him, saving his own life while I sat paralyzed by my own monstrous stupidity, will be burned into my memory forever. Even then, a pathetic, delusional part of me was still waiting. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. "Casper, baby," I whispered. He leaned against the counter, gasping for air, each breath a horrifying liquid sound. He looked at me, and the love was gone from his eyes. It was replaced by something I'd never seen before, a chilling mix of betrayal and raw animal fear. He didn't ask me to hold him. He didn't ask me what was happening. He just managed to force out 2 words, a command that shattered my entire world. "Call 911. He didn't choose me. He chose to live. And in that moment, I realized my test hadn't just failed. It had revealed a truth I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't his safe harbor. I was the storm. The paramedics were fast. They swarmed our apartment, a whirlwind of professional calm in my self-inflicted chaos. They stabilized Casper, their questions a blur I couldn't process. "Do you know what he ate? Was there any cross-contamination?" I just shook my head, mumbling, "I don't know," the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. They loaded him onto a gurney, and as they wheeled him out, he never once looked at me. I followed them to the hospital in a daze. I sat in the sterile, fluorescent-lit waiting room for what felt like an eternity, replaying the moment over and over. In my head, I was already crafting my defense, my pathetic explanation. It was an accident. A new brand of coconut milk, maybe. Anything other than the truth. After about an hour, a nurse told me he was stable and they were keeping him for observation. His parents were on their way. She led me to his room. He was sitting up in bed, an IV in his arm, looking pale and exhausted. The angry red blotches on his face had started to fade. He saw me in the doorway and his expression didn't change. It was just empty. "Leave the keys," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. "My car keys and your key to the apartment. Put them on the table." Tears started streaming down my face. "Casper, baby, I am so sorry. It must have been the curry paste. I should have checked." "Stop," he said. It wasn't a shout, but it cut through the air with the finality of a gunshot. "Just stop, Sierra. I found the empty packet, the peanut powder. It was in the kitchen trash can, right on top." He looked at me then, truly looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a weary, profound disappointment that was 1,000 times worse than anger. Why? That one word broke me. I collapsed into a blubbering mess, the whole insane, twisted logic of my test pouring out of me. I told him about Ryan, about my fear, about my desperate need to know he wouldn't leave. I was begging him to understand, to see the terrified little girl behind the monster. He listened without interrupting. When I was finished, sobbing and hiccuping, there was a long silence. "So you gambled with my life," he stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "You gambled with my life to make yourself feel better." He shook his head slowly, a gesture of utter finality. "Get out." I drove to my best friend Valerie's house, hoping for a shoulder to cry on, for someone to tell me it would be okay. I told her the same story, painting myself as a tragic, traumatized victim of my own fears. She listened, her face growing paler with every word. When I finished, she didn't hug me. She just stared at me, her expression horrified. "Sierra," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Listen to me very carefully. You didn't test him. You poisoned him. You watched him go into anaphylactic shock, and you did nothing until he saved himself. You almost killed the best man you'll ever know because you're insecure. You need help. Serious, professional help. But don't you dare call this a test." Her words were the slap in the face I didn't know I needed. The flimsy narrative I had built around myself. The one where I was the damsel in distress, crumbled into dust, leaving only the ugly, undeniable truth. I never heard from Casper directly again. Not a single text, not a call. Complete and total silence. It was a ghosting, but this time I deserved it. A week later, one of our mutual friends, looking incredibly uncomfortable, showed up at my door with 2 large boxes. It was all my stuff from Casper's apartment, my favorite mug, the hoodie I always stole from him, the photos from our trip to the coast. Everything was neatly packed. It was brutally efficient, a clean amputation. The silence was eating me alive. I was oscillating between moments of gut-wrenching clarity where Valerie's words, "You poisoned him," would echo in my head, and pathetic bouts of denial where I'd convince myself he just needed time. I thought if I could just see him, just talk to him without the fluorescent lights of the hospital between us, I could make him understand. Last night, I did something I'm deeply ashamed of. I still had a spare key to his apartment that he must have forgotten about. I let myself in. I don't even know what I was looking for. A sign, maybe. A reason to hope. The apartment was eerily neat, but it felt hollowed out. My presence had been completely scrubbed from it. The space on the bathroom counter where my skincare used to be was empty. My side of the closet was bare. His work tablet was on the coffee table. I know I shouldn't have, God, I know, but I couldn't stop myself. I opened it. The browser was still active, left open on a page he must have been looking at before everything. It was a custom jewelry website, a well-known one, famous for engagement rings. And there, in the middle of the screen, was a design in progress. A beautiful, simple platinum ring with a small, elegant sapphire, my birthstone. He had been using the 3D modeling tool to see how it would look with an engraving on the inside. The letters were clear as day. S and C, the air left my lungs in a single, painful rush. It wasn't just a relationship I had destroyed. It was a future. It was a proposal. It was everything I told myself I wanted. Everything my stupid, self-sabotaging brain convinced me I was about to lose. He wasn't planning on leaving me. He was planning on asking me to stay forever. I closed the tablet and stumbled out of his apartment. The image of that ring burned onto the back of my eyelids. That was the moment I finally understood. I hadn't just pushed him away. I had taken his love, his trust, and his future, and I had incinerated it all for nothing. Now I'm trapped in a new kind of hell, a digital one. My only connection to him is through his social media, and I've become a pathetic, obsessive stalker. I refresh his profile 100 times a day, searching for clues. Last night, he updated his status for the first time in weeks. It was a simple quote, something about gratitude for second chances, thankful for my life, and ready for a new beginning. Underneath it, a friend had commented, "So glad you're okay, man. Onwards and upwards." Casper had liked the comment. I just stared at that simple thumbs-up icon, my screen blurry with tears. He's moving on. He's starting his new beginning. And I'm stuck here, in the ending I wrote for myself, refreshing the page on a life I'm no longer in.